Hello, Brassic Gamer here. What is this? At first glance you might think, looks a bit like an AT class computer. How do we know? Well, it's got a turbo switch, or T-bow switch, which means you can reduce it from the AT's speed of, what was it, 8 megahertz? To reduce it to 4.77 to make it compatible with programs written specifically for the PC or XT. Now, the badge of the manufacturer of this computer has been removed, so we have no idea who made this, but it is reminiscent of IBM's AT. So I'm going to assume this is an AT compatible computer. There are some other bits of evidence we can look at. I haven't actually opened this yet. I literally picked it up yesterday from a guy who does house clearances, and this was in someone's loft. So we've got obviously your single 5¼ inch floppy drive, but look at that, it's a beast. And given its era, I'm going to guess that's MFM or Shugart interface. I guess we'll find out when we open it. You know that you've got something special when you have to throw a switch to turn it on. Let's see, that's such satisfying movement. And also, similar to the XT or PC, you've got the black painted metal on the back. Again, no badges or anything telling us. Ooh, I can see some green in there. I think we might have a corroding battery. This could be a non-starter. Now, interestingly here, we've got an RGB label. That suggests that there was an CGA or EGA card in this computer at some point, which has subsequently been upgraded with a VGA card. And if this is an AT class machine, then it will have 16-bit slots in it. I was hoping there might be a classic sound card or something, but no, alas. Nothing special or exotic. Right, let's crack this open and see what's on the inside. We've got the VGA card, which looks suspiciously like a Trident from this angle. I have to check the chipset, but it's probably an 8900, pretty standard. We've got a floppy drive, which may or may not work. We've got a massive hard drive. It's not very easy to read, but it is a Seagate drive, previously Shugart, and an MFM controller card, which is full length. And you've got the RAM on the motherboard there, which is the original DIP modules, and sure enough it is 16-bit. Where is the CPU? I don't know if you can see that corrosion a bit better now, but that's really horrific. That looks like a CoPro socket. And you've got a jumper for 10/8 megahertz. So have we got an Intel or an AMD CPU in here? Ah, that's cute. It's got one of those ones, it's got a heatsink on it. It could be a Harris chip, you know, because you'd only need a heatsink for something that was faster than a standard AT. So this is quite a curious system. Yeah, my battery ran out at the end of that video. Anyway, board has been removed, so there are literally 2 screws here and here, and then you can just slide the board out. It's quite neat, really. Obviously, in order to do that, I had to remove the various cards. So you've got discrete, parallel, and serial cards. And you know, these are like 10 a penny, they're not hard to get hold of. The graphics card, interestingly, it's a compact chipset, 1988. Not come across one of these before. And it made me think maybe this was a compact computer, but it's not, because I've looked online, I've looked in magazines, I've looked everywhere, and I cannot find this anywhere. The nearest thing I found to it was a Hyundai server, to a Super 286 server. But I think it is a Super 286 machine, because you can choose between 8 and 10 megahertz. And now we can see the damage caused by the battery, which isn't as extensive as it could be, but it's still not good. Well, it seems to be isolated to this particular area. So there's the MFM controller and floppy controller, and that's quite handy. It's a Western Digital model WD1003 WA2. So I don't know what hard drives that supports, but look at that. Right, so there's your standard 3.5-inch IDE hard drive, and there's the Seagate. So what I'm going to do with this board now is remove all the socketed chips. I'm going to put it in the dishwasher to give it a general clean over, so that I can see exactly what's going on with this. So, and there's no evidence of what this board is. I mean, ZM72005. There's no evidence of that online. You've got your ROM chips, odd and even. It's yeah. I mean, look, it's you can see how much discrete logic there is. There's no chipset here as such, in the sense that we understand it in modern computers, as in you've got one microcontroller linking up, you know, like North and South Bridge. You just didn't have that back in the day. And the CPU is interesting. I don't know if it is a Harris one, it could be an Intel one, but it's one of those weird ones which I've never seen in real life, where it's like land grid array before land grid array came along. So there's no actual pins on the CPU, it's got contacts when you turn it upside down. So yeah, alright, let's take all these chips off. It'd be really interesting to get this machine working. Yeah, dishwasher takes too long, so I've got one of these handy hoses on my sink. Do that with hot water. Okay, well, here's the board post rinse. Dishwasher takes too long. Stickers are all still intact, which is nice. Managed to get the CPU out of there with a little encouragement of the heatsink, and yeah, there we go. It's an Intel 80286 running at 10 megahertz. The date code on the CPU itself says 82, which is when the 286 was introduced, and 85, so maybe it's 1985, this one. But definitely 100% AT clone. Now, if we look at the previously dirty area of the board, it looks like the traces are... Oh, no, I was going to say they all look intact, but we may have some gaps there. So I don't know how much repair is going to be needed, but first I'm going to rework the various solder which has been affected by the leakage, and obviously remove the battery itself. It's a similar story on the other side of the board, and I will get the multimeter out and test these various traces. Not a disaster, I would say. I've seen worse. So this is going to be a little laborious because of the amount of time it will take to do this, but it's worth it because it gives us the best possible chance of having a working board afterwards. So as you can see here, where we have the connections for the power supply, you've got nice shiny connections on the left and dull blue kind of weird connections on the right. So what we want is for all of these as well, in fact, to be looking shiny and fresh. What I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up the pad. Normally I would put flux on the connection as well, but I don't have any flux, so I'm just going to use solder, and that will draw the flux from the middle of that. So by including the flux in the process, that will help the old solder to flow. Then we will be back to kind of scratch, if you like, with the connections, at which point we can redo them. So better get going. Okay, we're getting there. So I've removed a bunch of the affected components and just kind of cleaned up the pads. The wires, I'm going to have to test those. I've soaked the keyboard plug in some acid, and that has stripped all of the corrosion off there, and the other components as well, which had all the green shit on them. I'm going to do some continuity testing, and then I'm going to consider putting the components back on. Oh, another thing, I was a little heavy-handed removing one of the capacitors, and I broke it. So its neighbour appears to be 470 ohm. I forgot what they're called now, these ones. Tantalum, bloody tantalum. I've got a few of those, so I'll just replace it. Should be fine. Okay, well, that's taken most of the day, but as you can see, the components are back in place. I broke the tantalum one, so I had to put a ceramic one in its place. Hopefully that won't make any difference. It's just generally looking a bit better. I've done some continuity testing and I can't find any broken traces. So what I've got to do is replace the logic chips, install it back in the case, and also I'm going to check out this tank of a power supply, because I don't want to be turning that on and it go poof because I don't have a replacement. Looks good, needs a clean. Fortunately, it comes out quite easily, so let's do that. Look how shiny and clean that is. Yeah. Power supply's in. Can't see any problems with that. I've lubricated the fan. That should reduce any possible noise. Got to put the hard drive and the floppy drive in there, and then the cards. And I can't wait. This one's going to have to go on the back burner because I found, well, after troubleshooting the motherboard loads, I realised that the power supply was fine. I was getting good voltage to all the chips. I think there are 2 BIOS chips missing, which I thought to begin with, because you just had numbers 2 and 4 there. And I thought, okay, maybe that's not unusual because they're in opposing spots. And if you're going to take 2 CMOS chips out of a motherboard, surely you would take the 2 next to each other, I don't know. So anyway, I can download the ROM thanks to Vogons and Predator 99. And yeah, the power switch buckle kind of broke when I went to turn it on and destroyed. And I thought, and find a replacement for a 25-year-old, actually no, 30-year-old rocker switch, 33 years old. But
I know people complain about eBay, but thanks to eBay, and they sell it in Israel. I don't know how long these bad boys have been sitting around in someone's box, but they're basically new old stock. They're a little bit different, but hopefully no issues that would be obstructive. Doesn't look like it. And then I can refit that to the power supply. And then I'm going to put this in storage and deal with it another time. But yeah, I think it works. I think the restoration is complete. I just can't prove it. Moving on.